recently received a tip from one of our viewers that these were for sale online. This is a Microsoft Xbox XDK, so it's an Xbox developer kit. This is for the Xbox Series X, and we are not supposed to have one of them. We were able to buy this through the online auction. These pop up every now and then, and media is definitely not supposed to have it, but only developers are the intended users of these. That's why you don't see many of them in the wild. And also, as we found out, they pretty much immediately get banned. So none of these games worked on the XDK that we bought. We went and picked all these up from a local GameStop, which will now be going out of business because we have to return them. And this was most of their quarterly sales volume. But not a big loss. Anyway, we're banned from it. The last thing we really are able to do with this at this point is tear it apart and see how it looks internally, and that's what we're going to do today. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Montech Sentry 850 Gold Power Supply. The Sentry 850 watt is an 80+ gold certified power supply, also available in 550 watt and 650 watt capacities at generally competitive prices with the rest of the market. The Sentry 850 watt includes a 5-year warranty, 2 EPS 12-volt connectors, 6 PCIe cables, and plenty of peripheral cables, making it easy to scale this modular power supply up or down for your build. Learn more at the link in the description below. So a couple things to know. Patrick spent several days trying to figure out how to do any kind of gaming or testing on this device without connecting it to the internet. That was our #1 priority. We decided we would just not connect it at all if possible because that would avoid getting banned. Unfortunately, this was already hardware banned because the previous owner managed to get it detected by Microsoft and shut off. So we had no chance from the get-go. It was already hardware level, just completely deactivated. Can't play any games, can't log into accounts. We can, however, still get a good look at something that the public doesn't get to see very often. This is very similar externally, if not almost the same, to the Project Scorpio dev kit. That's this one. This is the names are challenging for me with Xbox in these days. This looks very similar. It's like a scaled down version of the dev kit. Let's take a look at the dev kit up close. So externally, first of all, in front of it's very interesting because the XDK has actually an LCD in here. We have some B-roll shots we can show of this. There's a small screen in here that can be made to display any number of things. So some of them are functional, where you can use the screen to navigate and change the functionality of these 5 programmable buttons. These are available for developers to program things like if you want to toggle an FPS overlay in your game while you're debugging it, for example, you could program that to one of these 5 buttons, hit it, and then that'll turn it on or off. The screen is also actually able to render via GPU the gameplay. So if you wanted to treat this as your primary display, strictly for debugging purposes, you could do that. On the back here, you can see there's a 10 gigabit debug Ethernet, and then there's one that they clearly mark as retail. This is actually pretty neat because one of the biggest bottlenecks that game developers run into when iterating is that iteration process, where if you're doing daily builds or multiple times a day builds, transferring all of that data to a device is probably one of the dumbest bottlenecks that you also can't really do anything about. And it's a dumb bottleneck because it's just transferring. There's no human process involved. All you do is move the files and you sit there and you wait. So that was a big problem in the past, and that's why Microsoft has moved towards these higher speed throughput options. So they've got like a USB Type-C interface on there as well. If you had an external drive as a developer, 10 gigabit for internal network will not be representative of retail use for internet connectivity, but great for connecting to a NAS or a local server and pulling your daily build for that. There are no obvious screws on any of these panels, so none on the back. I do think this is going to be as simple as it pulls apart right in the middle, and then you can see this external chassis houses the part with all the I/O. So I'm thinking probably the screws are going to be under the feet here. All right, that's some glue, man. There's the thing. I don't know where the screw is. Are there just no screws? Okay, that's relatively complex. I'm just going to track the screw. All right. I'm going to track the screws by type on the mod mat. We'll put these over here in that block. You can get one of our anti-static mod mats on store.gamersaccess.net if you'd like to grab one. These are useful for their wiring diagrams, their screw tracking grids, their anti-static conductive properties, and for protecting the table that you're building on. Okay, so that should probably be most of it. I pinch my finger in the plastic. Damn. Could have saved myself the trouble on that one. This looks like it comes out. Is it gonna snap? Or it'll come out. Okay. I do still feel like that's supposed to come off at some point soon.
This
Yeah.
evenly along the top.
Okay, that's what we were just doing. So I stopped. Broke the fucking tool. It's old and brittle plastic. I didn't even pry that hard. It just snapped. Well, that's in there forever. What's left? Oh, okay, that answers that. Okay, cool. I got it out actually without any casualties. Very close to one on this, but it survived. Okay. It's like a computer case panel. I mean, it's just same exact. Okay. So there's a ribbon cable in here that goes to the LCD. Don't want to break that. Okay, we've gotten in. Internally on the front end up here, we've got this PCB for the buttons. So I'm not going to bother taking that out. It's just going to have some switch detection, and that's going to be it. So this actually looks like it's labeled really well. This looks more like a PlayStation 5 internally. Maybe we put one up next to it than it does the Xbox. This is the Xbox that it ultimately represented. Very different. This one's pretty interesting inside. It's really compact, well built. We showed it previously. Thermally, it behaves pretty well. Oh my gosh. All right. Right out the gate, we got some very large. They all are all marked. So credit, I suppose, to Microsoft. They've marked and labeled all these really clearly. So you can see this kind of rocks now. So I think this can mostly come up and out. There's a couple screws I've skipped here intentionally, but we're going to see if they need to come out or not. It's in. That's okay, all right. Well, I'm feeling pretty good about preserving everything. Here we have a very, very fragile, you're never going to be able to replace this cable attached to the display. You can see the back of the display right there. That is a hell of a display. That is really specific. Very small, and I don't know if it's custom made for this or not. You feel free to let us know in the comments if you've seen this in other small electronic devices. 21st of April, 2020. It's actually very close to the launch, which was later in the same year. Oh. Nice. So far, nothing is broken, except for my tools. I really want to see the heatsink for this. I think the stuff I'm most interested in, so I definitely, we're up to 10 modules here for memory, and I'd like to see if there's any on the other side. SSD over here, so there's an M.2 SSD, standard actually, let's just take this out. Western Digital, 1 terabyte. Not sure if they shipped this in all of them. Sometimes they switch up the supply, but anyway, that's the drive. Okay, next. So this is, it looks like just plastic standoffs or retention. I think we can get this out without removing those. Like basically trying to blindly wiggle these cables out of the connectors. And there's a lot of them. But I've gotten almost half of them now. I'm disconnecting all those cables mostly one by one. I think I'm probably going to be stuck at this point though, because I can't get in there. There we go. Okay. Well, there's the blower fan. It's a Delta fan. 12 volts, 0.8 amps. That is a lot of power. They've got this foam ring around it. Pretty good attention to detail, honestly. This is not a good permanent solution for a consumer device for a number of reasons. Like dust, for example, will break that adhesive with time. But it does allow it to form more of a seal with the underside of this ring on the inside so that it can guide the air, obviously, where it's supposed to go. So anyway, that's kind of cool to see. I feel like I should be able to just like... I don't remember leaving that in there. Oh, there's another fan. Wait a minute. I didn't even realize that. There's 2 fans in here. Okay, hang on. Oh, man. That would have been a lot easier. We didn't talk about this much earlier. This is thermal putty. These are not thermal pads, to be very clear. Thermal putty is pretty useful because you don't need to get the exact dimensions, the exact padding. You know, with thermal pads, you also have to account for the squish factor. This, you just put on thermal putty and then it just kind of squishes out on its own like thermal paste, except it's a little bit more solid, so it stays where you put it. They are probably using a machine application or something functionally equivalent to like a silk screen, just basically something to get the exact shape every time here. But anyway, this is a pretty good solution for conducting heat. They're conducting it into what appears to be a steel chassis. This looks like aluminum maybe, and it could be tin. Anyway, so they're conducting it into the chassis and making use of the chassis, which is good. There's some small aluminum blocks sticking up that the memory modules heatsink into right there. It's not that direct of a path, but it's something as long as there's some airflow over it. And then this one can come out of the way now. Next, so this is what I didn't see when we were working on the other side, is that there's 2 fans. So then, this one is the actual heatsink fan. It looks much larger. We're going to look at that. Actually, it is much larger. So far thicker fan, which is helpful for getting more air volume through there. This one sits here with this ring around it to guide the flow. It butts up this flow guide, basically like a chimney, right up against a smaller heatsink. Wow, very crude heatsink. Very crude heatsink. Large fins that are not particularly pretty. And the air will go through there and sort of out the back. There's not much of an escape back here. You can see a little bit will leak out through the holes near the I/O, through the I/O even, but probably most of it will come out here, but it's an indirect path, so it's going to bounce around in there a little bit. Here's the large fan, unbranded. It's got a Delta logo down here though. So Delta, I guess, makes this entire enclosure. 12 volts, 1 amp. That is very aggressive fan. So that's a 12 watt fan. Typically in computer power supplies or computer fans, you'll see like 12 volts, 0.2 amps, 0.3 amps, maybe 0.4, but this is 1 amp, which is about the limit of a lot of the cheaper motherboard fan headers to even before they start melting to begin with. So very powerful fan. It's a blower and it's got large fins. The hub's also kind of large. So you trade some of the potential there for the hub size, but that's just how these types of fans work. And then it sits, you can see right here, it sits over this big fin stack where we've got copper heat pipes and aluminum fins. So that's going to sit like this. where we have air is able to enter, and then air exits over here, basically out of more or less a duct. So pretty standard design there. You can see that this was not their finest metal selection or work for this XDK, but given the low volume of these are probably handmade and low volume parts, so I'm actually not bothered by what we're seeing here. For the cooling solution, this is a very large vapor chamber. I'll show you that in a moment. So that's a vapor chamber. You can tell from where they've sealed it here, vacuum sealed it, and the fin stack is an aluminum fin stack with good density, but not so much that's going to cause impedance issues for that fan. And we have 3 copper heat pipes. Let's get the heatsink off. It's not like I need to not disturb the thermal characteristics on this one. So how's this going to work? Kind of special tool. Whoa! That's cool! What is that? I don't know what that bit is named. I should please. I've had this bit since before we moved out of the house. So probably like 6 years. I've never had to use it. And there you go. Look at that. Look at how much easier that is. I was about to get like a flathead and then hammer it. Cool. Very strange. There's more memory. So this console here, the consumer Series X, is 16 gigabytes of memory. And now it is actually becoming clear where some of those early leaks and rumors came from for the Series X, where it was talking about super high memory capacity. It was from this. So the XDK does in fact have additional memory. You can see it's dual-sided here. These are probably 1 gigabyte density, maybe 2. So let's see, we've got 6, 10 on each side. So it's going to be either 20 or 40. I don't think I'm overlooking any modules. So we've done some preliminary research here on these memory modules. These are 16 gigabit modules, which means 2 gigabytes. There's 8 bits in a byte. So each of these is 2 gigabytes of VRAM. These are GDDR6. You wouldn't want to use DRAM on this. It'd be far too slow since the CPU and the GPU are sharing their memory solution. So that puts it at 20 gigabytes per side, which puts us at a total, as far as we can tell here, of 40 gigabytes. So that's a lot of memory. That's a lot of RAM for any gaming system. Not as much for a development system, but they're not programming the games on these devices. They are probably running them, though, very suboptimally. So this amount of memory would allow you to run debugging software in the background without interfering with your game too much, pulling memory away from where it's needed for the gaming application. It would allow sloppier code. So if you're in a rapid development environment where you're not optimizing, you're not compressing textures, things like that, then having additional memory allows them to kind of get away with less optimization before they're done developing the product to a point where it deserves to be optimized. So that's sort of my read on the situation, but that is where some of those early rumors came from. It's from this. That's a lot of RAM for a console. Cool. So Patrick's also pulled up the data sheet from Samsung for this memory, and it is 14 gigabits per second per Samsung's data sheet. It's possible they tune that stuff for the customer, which is Microsoft, but unlikely. Let's just get the crusty paste off the GPU or the SoC. I don't have a real model. It says Series X in the bottom corner, but anyway, that's the SoC they have on here. Very large SoC. It's huge, and a lot of memory to cool. They've got half of it directly sunken into the vapor chamber over here, and the other half is far less adequately cooled. going into these kind of shoddy aluminum sinks attached to what looks to be a steel chassis. So not very efficient there, but it's got a lot of surface area to spread, so it may be able to compensate. So it's the last piece to look at here. Is this. This is the part I like working on. So large standoffs. This is obviously the contact patch, the cold plate for the SoC. They're syncing the memory into the same block. You can see how large the vapor chamber is too by looking at it from this angle, where the actual chamber part of it is pretty huge. Internally in these, they have these small rings that stack up in a column. So they're small copper rings. They stack, and they, one, prevent crushing. They provide a little more surface area as well, though. We've shown those being manufactured in factory tours in the past. The heat pipes, final piece here. So these 3 heat pipes, they come down and terminate under here. They get smaller as they go and connect directly to the copper vapor chamber plate and also, obviously, the aluminum fin stack. Okay, so we're done tearing it down. So I do think the design's pretty interesting. We can't really do thermal testing. I really wanted to, but we would need more than a menu screen for that to really be viable. It's just not going to consume enough power at a menu screen to be relevant. So in an ideal world, we'd be able to just compare this one to that one for no reason other than it would be kind of fun to do so. But it is a hardware level ban, and perhaps if you in the audience, if one of you knows how to spoof a Microsoft authentication server, or if you're in a position to unban us without your boss knowing, then I guess that would also work. But barring getting access to playing games on this, probably I will put it in a frame that we can put on the wall in pieces. The console, that is, not the frame. That wouldn't make much sense. So that's it for the teardown. Definitely the most interesting thing to come out of this is the 20 gigabytes per side of RAM, so 40 gigabytes total G6. The differences here versus the original Project Scorpio dev kit, from what we could tell, externally it looks about the same. Internally it is lacking the hard drive. It has, there's actually no memory card slot that you see on a consumer device either. We're thinking maybe you can plug something in via USB Type-C or something to simulate that. So there's a couple differences, but really it's just kind of a neat piece of technology to take apart and get to see in person, because there's not many of these out there. And now we can say that Microsoft has banned us. So technically the previous owner, but I'd rather take credit for it. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. It was a lot of fun to do. We spent a lot on getting this console, and this is the end of our content we can do with it. So if you'd like to support our work, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab one of our teardown mod mats like we have on the table here that I worked on for the whole shoot. These are anti-static conductive mod mats. They are very resilient to heat, for example, if you want to do tube bending or other PC building projects, or just disassembly projects in general. Great for screw tracking and for cable pinouts. And you can also go to patreon.com/gamersnexus for bonus videos. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.